Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to learn the differences between 3 different policy models: RBAC, ABAC, and ReBAC. And we're going to do that under 5 minutes. So brace back and let's get going. First of all, what is RBAC? Well, RBAC stands for Role-Based Access Control, and it's the simplest policy model out of all of them. Now, let's talk about a quick overview of what RBAC is. Well, imagine that you have a responsibility in your company and you get assigned a role of a manager. Maybe as a manager, you can only do basic interactions with different resources. Let's say you can delete a document, or maybe you can make a coffee, or maybe you can leave work. That is a very simple RBAC policy, and it's very simple to configure because all you really need to know is the role that you have, the resources that you can interact with, and the bespoke actions you can perform on the resources. In this case, I have another example where a user with identity X is assigned a role of an administrator, and an administrator can add new users to the file system. That is a very basic RBAC policy. Now, what if we want to get a little bit more complex with our policies, far more granular? Our companies come at us and expand their offer proposition, and suddenly there's many departments and there's many roles, and different roles might have to have specific restrictions on what they can and cannot do. Well, that's where ABAC comes in. Now, what is ABAC? Well, ABAC stands for Attribute-Based Access Control. And how do we define ABAC? Well, ABAC pretty much just adds extra conditions on top of RBAC. What does that mean? Well, for example, for any role that we have or for any resource that we have, we can specify specific conditions that we want to meet as part of that enforcement. What does that mean? Well, let me give you an example. We have an administrator at a company who wants to delete a document, right? Now, what happens if we want to add more restrictions to this? Well, the document is the resource, the administrator is the role. So on the role, well, maybe we can have administrators who are only based in Poland, for example, and maybe we can have resources that have a specific time access added on top of them. In this case now, maybe an administrator who's only located inside of Poland can only delete a document between specific times of the day. So that is a far more granular condition, and that's what ABAC is. Now I have another example here, and we're saying that a user with identity X is assigned a role of an administrator, and then an administrator who is based in Germany can add new users to the file system only between Monday and Friday. Now that is ABAC for you, but what if we need even further granularity in our permissions? What if we really have to dive deeper into seeing how those permissions can really reflect a real workspace? And what do we have inside of a real workspace? Well, we have relationships between colleagues, between our managers, between the owners of the company. So we can have relationships between an operation. An operation can have a farm. Each farm can have multiple fields. And therefore we get that cascading effect of how those permissions can be passed down from one resource to the next. Now, well, what is ReBAC? Well, ReBAC stands for Relationship-Based Access Control. Now, in general, ReBAC talks about the connection of users. And the way I like to think about ReBAC is as a graph. It's a graph of nodes and edges. The nodes are the resources that you're dealing with, and the edges is how those permissions passed down between the different resources. So how those permissions effectively cascade down and give permissions to other users. Now I have an example here of what a ReBAC policy might look like. A user with identity X is assigned the role of an administrator. An administrator can only access a file system if he belongs to group A. And therefore, that is that relationship here that we also take into account. Now, RBAC, ABAC, and ReBAC are policy models on its own. But the cool thing is that you can use those policy models together. So you can combine RBAC with ReBAC or ABAC with ReBAC to get even far more granularity in the permission modeling that you do. Now, if you want to learn more about policy modeling, well, you can check us out at permit.io. And also make sure you follow all the links down below to check out our documentation, to read more about what you can do and how you can model things. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.